in episode 51 of the Special Needs Supermom. Could you have an autistic kid and not know about it? The answer? Yes, totally. Short story about Wonderboy. Our Wonderboy, now 17 years old, is on the autistic spectrum and has ADHD. And in the early days, we had no idea. We also had no problem at home. You know, we always joked about the fact that Wonderboy looked like us. You know, he had the more straight-lined, single hubby kind of thing, like his dad, not liking big crowded spaces, preferring to stay at home and not go outside. And, you know, having the, we joked, ADHD personality, you know, being over-enthusiastic from his mom. And that kind of is also the reason why we didn't see a problem. He really looked like us. He really was the sheer image of us both. In the way he handled things, how he played, what he liked. So we had no problem because we didn't have a diagnosis or anything. But we knew what worked for us in life. You know, my husband being in the military and being away a lot. Our weekends were really quiet. We didn't do any big social outings. We didn't go to theme parks and everything. So that helped Wonderboy because my husband was away from home during the week. I had a really strict schedule during the day, you know, because I had to work as well. We had to go to daycare early in the morning. So there was a really strict schedule from day to day. And that helped as well. And because Wonderboy looked like us, we knew exactly how to, you know, handle him, help him, because we understood him. And we really lived by the old-fashioned rules of, you know, quiet time and a schedule. Things really our grandparents used to teach us. And without realizing, we actually had them in place for ourselves. So those things, when somebody suggested to us, it was one of his first teachers actually, that he might be on the autistic spectrum. Our only reference being the movie Rain Man. We were shocked and appalled and angry and devastated when I Googled autism. That's the last time, by the way, I ever Googled a diagnosis on a not official scientific medical website. Because back in the days, you only found really negative stories. And I went like, but he's really smart. And he's our house philosopher. Even at the age of 4, he would have these big philosophical questions. And he is caring. He looked us in the eyes, he loved to hug, and still to this day, he really, really needs his hugs. All things that were not seen as autistic. And, you know, even to this day, we have people saying to us, yeah, he can't be autistic because, you know, he's social, he loves to hug, he loves to chat. So all those things, you know, they having Rain Man in their head as well. They're like, no, that can't be autism. So it's really funny that suddenly, well, not funny, it wasn't funny at all, that somebody suggested it to us because we had no problems with him at home until he had to go to school. But then we thought, you know, when they would say he doesn't want to sit still, well, and I was like, well, if you're bored, I can get that. And I never sit still as well. And we were like, he's probably not challenged enough. And if they had a drawing assignment, he would do it in a different way, a way more difficult, challenging way. And we were like, you know, that's because he's so intelligent. He had this fantasy language. But we understood him. And I have a big imagination myself. So I never saw that as a problem either. And we understood him, so, you know, what's the problem? So one, there are can you have a kid that's autistic and you don't even realize? Totally. Especially because there are so many forms of autism. Rayman, forget about Rayman. Or, I went to a theater show with two adult autistic men, and their title of the show was, excuse my language, fuck Rayman. Because they're still dealing with problems that, people are like, oh, you're autistic, and their immediate reaction is like the movie Rayman. Not being able to be social, or talk, or express feelings, or get a high education, things like that. So I got sidetracked here, but that's my ADHD thingy. There are really a lot of forms, and if your kid can talk a lot and is social, laughs, gives you a hug, well, we didn't know, but it doesn't mean he doesn't have autism, because we realized later on there are actually problems. And like I said, second, if he or she is kind of like you probably don't realize it, because you already have systems in place for yourself that work for you. And because they work for you, they work for your kids. And especially when your kid is younger and you have a tight schedule, because, work, after school, care programs. Because of that really strict schedule, most autistic kids, and ADHD kids, by the way, as well, thrive on a strict schedule and quiet time. So big chance is that problems don't emerge until, let go of that system, or when the outer world steps in. In our case, school started and he had to sit still, and he had to eat his lunch in a circle. At home he never had to do that, because I remember having a little brother and we had to wait for hours until that boy was finally finished with his dinner. So when I got kids, I went like, one thing they never have to do is wait for everybody to finish their meal. So we never saw his impatience at the table, because if he ate, he was a picky eater, but if he ate the bites, he had to eat, because he at least had to taste the food, and we were fine, so he was excused. So there are many forms, and if your kid is like you probably don't see it, because you probably don't have a problem yourself. Or you found a way that works for you, and therefore works for your kid. What, however, could be possible signs that your kid is on the autistic spectrum? For us, realizing this later, was that he had a fantasy language for a long time. Until, I think, the age of 4 or 6. Well, by the time he was 6, he was able to just talk normal. But beforehand, he would have a lot of fantasy words, and structures didn't make sense. Another thing is that he might only have one thing he wants to play with. Again, we never saw this as a problem. Pepin, from the day he was born, only plays with Lego. That's his thing. We didn't see it as a problem, because let's be honest, adults, how many hobbies do you have? So we were like, he only likes Legos. I only liked my husband, because I'm a bad example, but my husband only likes to play flight simulation games in his spare time. Okay, and build a flight simulation nowadays. But only that. That's the only thing he likes. Me, I have a few hobbies, but not that much. And I don't have a gazillion friends, so didn't see the problem there. Another sign could be that, if you have a really restless kid, and that could be, of course, a sign for ADHD as well, is that, they can't sit still. And their body's always restless. A fourth sign, we realized later on with Wonderboy, was that if your head is always full, again, this could be an ADHD sign as well, but Wonderboy's head was always full. He had a really hard time falling asleep because the moment he would lay in bed and he had no distractions, all these ideas, all these thoughts popped up. What happened during the day and how he handled things and mostly what didn't go well, overthinking things. So his mind would never shut up. And we just, thought, that's because he's really sensitive and he sees more than other people. Yeah, apparently, I found out recently, not everybody has a gazillion thoughts in their head all the time. So that's really interesting to watch. Another possible sign, if you have a kid that's a really picky eater. Again, my husband is a really picky eater. I mean, drives me bananas. So Wonderboy didn't like warm food. And to be honest, I thought that was the case because when I was pregnant, the idea of hot food alone just made me green in the face. So when I was pregnant of him, I only ate bread and cold veggies and vegetables. Fruit. And a lot of chocolate, by the way. He loves chocolate. I honestly thought, that's probably because, I never liked that when I was pregnant with him. So maybe I gave it to him in some crazy way. But he was really picky there. So it was not only that his food had to be cold. His food also had to be separated. So no mixed potato vegetable thingies. It had to be cleared on his board. They had different sections. Another sign. He was at a theme park or at birthday parties. The meltdowns. Wonderboy never had meltdowns. Not in the supermarket. Not, in class because he would kind of behave. But when he would come home from school or at birthday parties where a lot of people were asking things of him and he had to participate in everything. He had to be social in a certain way. It went the wrong way. And especially around Christmas and St. Nicholas. And I talk about this in a separate episode on how you can prepare your kid for Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff like that. Was that if he had an idea in his head, it has to go this way, or I really want this present, and he would get something that was not what he asked for, not something he normally played with. He was still really polite, so he wouldn't say anything, but the meltdown afterwards, not being angry and kicking and screaming, but crying, being really sad, going to himself. And I saw it especially with the grandparents. They were like, they tried to force things on him. Yeah, he only plays with Lego, so he really should have some other interests as well. So they would force gifts on him that he hated. Or he just didn't get, why would you give me something I didn't ask for? And I didn't, I normally don't play with. And I don't like. He couldn't handle something like that. So if your kid is really focused on, only playing with one type of toys, only interested in that, and can't handle or even appreciate, getting a gift that they didn't ask for, that could be a big sign as well. Handwriting. We always say that Wonderboy has the handwriting of a doctor. It costs him so much energy to, have a pen and all these thoughts that are going a zillion miles an hour, and then try to focus that on this little point of a pen or a pencil. All that energy has to come out of that and to try to write. You see a lot of autistic kids have problems with writing as well. The same with spelling and grammar rules. Wonderboy is totally fine with Shakespearean English. Or old, here in the Netherlands, old Dutch grammar rules. New grammar rules, he just doesn't get it. We have this saying that, if a sound is long or short, there should be a double D or a double B or something like that. But he doesn't hear there is a long or short sound. He doesn't grasp that. So language can be all kinds of forms. Can be a real challenge. Having said that, all those signs I just told you don't have to be the case. Like I said, we never saw a problem, and all those typical autistic things, our Wonderboy, we thought wasn't, a big hugger, really social. He's the first one in my household, still today, asking me, can I help you with something, Mom? Mom, you're doing too much. Please sit down. He's really my caretaker in that way, trying to look after his mom. So he's really sensitive in that way. And you often hear that autistic kids are not sensitive or only are focused on themselves or can't express emotions. That's not the case, or that doesn't have to be the case. Of course, there are kids with I would call it severe autism that have bigger challenges. But especially if I hate the title of this, high functioning autism, and that mainly means you can go to a regular school, or you're able to survive on a regular school. Let me just say survive a regular school. And you're able to have conversations with other people, and you're social in one way or the other, able to look people in the eye, things like that. It's one of the things that are looked over, and people are like, that's not autistic. I kind of lost my train of thought again, so I don't know how I should finish that sentence. But so, can you have an autistic kid without realizing it? Yes, totally. One, because there are so many forms of autism. We had no idea. And two, our kid, your kid, can look like you. So you totally understand your kid, know how to handle him, know what works for your kid, because it works for you. So without even thinking of it, you have a system in place because it works for you and therefore works for your kid. If you have a younger kid, you'll probably have a really strict schedule from day to day. A lot of autistic and ADHD kids thrive on that. Like I said, there are possible signs. The language struggle, grammar struggle, being focused on only one kind of toy to play with. In our case, it was Legos. But it can be all kinds of things. Not being able to hug or not see the bigger view. Our Wonderboy would always say, I can't escape my head. There are so many things and thoughts, and I have to think about so much, and I can never shut it off. That might be a sign. Because apparently there are people that have like a nothing box where they think about nothing. Google that. Nothing box. A hilarious comedian talked about the nothing box and the difference between men and women, by the way. But the women box, I'm pretty sure ADHD and autism is like that. Everything is connected and there are so many thoughts going on. Picky eater. Picky about clothes, by the way, if they're sensitive about things, or totally not sensitive. We found out when Wonderboy was about 9 or 10. He was walking in shoes that were way too small, but he just didn't, our sensitive super boy, didn't feel it. So I have to really be careful and look at, is your underwear still okay? Really, your socks. this summer, major breakthrough, I asked him, so which socks feel nice and which don't? And just by rephrasing it, I was able to identify which socks were too small. Because saying too small, he would be like, yeah, but I can still, try them on and fit them. I just have to really struggle. But in his mind, they were not too small because he could still put them on. So I just had to rephrase the question. To end this positively, we've learned in those 17 years that while we were devastated when we first heard the term autism in connection with Wonderboy, the good news is, and a lot of that has to do with the fact how you perceive it and how you handle the term autism. We never saw it as a problem. We always kind of joked because he looked like us. So, being autistic or not, it was already kind of a joke in our house. Like in the Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon, which I highly recommend. Young Sheldon. Young Sheldon is an extreme form of, more the classic way of autism. But it's interesting to see how he thought as a young boy. And what he found weird in normal people, how people dealt with the world and everything. Anyway, I think this is the third time I lost my train of thought. The good news is, Wonderboy is thriving. Despite, or maybe thanks to, the diagnosis of autism, once we finally had the diagnosis in place, so many doors opened. Doors in, for his education, because he got extra help in his school. Doors in the way of the fact that he was able to get a training that helped him when he was a little bit older. Age does matter in that way. When he was a little bit older, he got a training or a therapy about autism and what it means. And it learned him to see, okay, you see things this way. And it goes wrong because other people, and normal people, normal, I don't mean everybody's different, but for sake of the argument, normal people see the world this way. And him realizing that, he went like, oh, that's why I sometimes have to do this or say that. And it helped his peers, his classmates, when he was in 5th grade, when he gave a presentation, they went like, oh, that's why you sometimes do what you do. And they went like, oh, okay, and moved on with the day because it helped them understand our son better. So in that way, it really, of course, there was one nasty kid making comments, but there will always be nasty kids, always be nasty adults, always be Karens out there. But you can't focus on that. We were really afraid of the stigma. We were really afraid when we didn't know anything about autism. But because Wonderboy got his therapy sessions, and because he understood himself better and understood other people better, it helped him, and that was the greatest gift, accept himself. One day, I want to kind of finish with that to give you hope for the future. First of all, Wonderboy is now in college. He went to a special education high school, normal elementary school, because it was small and doable. High school was way too much, so he went to a specialized high school. What, to be admitted, I found scary, but it really helped him prepare for life later on. He's now in college. He's thriving on online classes at the moment, so COVID can be a blessing in that way. At least for COVID, for Wonderboy, the online lessons are a blessing. But he is going to college and he found his way, and he's actually really open about him being autistic. And because he's really open about it, it helps other people understand him. When we had a family gathering one day, and my son went like, oh, this is not autistic enough for me. I can't handle this. This is way too chaotic. And my mother went like, oh, shh, don't say that. You shouldn't say out loud that you're autistic. And my 17-year-old, well, then he was about, I think, 10 or 11, said, Grandma, I'm autistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. I can still tear up when I say that. I'm so proud that he went like, and it's something you can do as a parent as well. Because in that way, we had problems with, when we started with the diagnose process and we didn't know what it meant, but we never judged Pepin the way he was. And we had our systems in place at home. And when something is too chaotic, I can't handle it, he can't handle it, we can't joke about it. We're also really open about it. So we still have, of course, people that judge, but those are the people that don't matter. That really don't matter. Because in the end, it's all about, your kid and how you can help him or her further on in life. And that maybe with a diagnosis or maybe not. But you as a parent probably know in your gut what's best for your kids. So, can your kid be autistic without you realizing it? Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. On that note, I wish you a really good week. I hope you liked this episode. If so, please rate, review, leave a comment, please. Let me know how it was for you. If you already had that process of a diagnose, was it an eye-opener or not? Please share. And if you want to share it in a more private in a more private setting, yes, that was it, setting, feel free to go to Facebook. I've got a private Facebook group called Special Needs Supermoms. And you see a little drawing with a stick figure drawing of me with a glass of wine and a lightsaber. That's the sign. Come join us, because that's a private group with only special needs supermoms. So there's no judgment and you can ask, cry, laugh, share your stories all in the private session. So please rate and review. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment and I see you the next time. Bye.